Good morning, everyone. I believe we are live, coming to you live with our show here, our weekly get together. Are you there, God? It's Kira and Phil. And it's also the rest of you. It's not just Kira and Phil. It's everyone who gathers with us and listens to us and asks questions.
In true priestly fashion, we stand here before God on your behalf and with you as a part of us and us as a part of you. It's theologically deep. It's not just a clever name.
Right. We're offering up your questions to the Lord.
Like a fragrance, like a fine fragrance of offering to God, like the finest incense, your questions. Whoops, that's my phone.
Yeah. I'm Kira.
Hey, Kira.
I'm the priest in charge at St. Anne's Episcopal Church in Nashville, Tennessee.
And I am Philip DeVaul, and I'm rector of, where am I? Church of the Redeemer in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Queen City of the Midwest. So cool. So good to be with you today, Kira.
It's good to be with you. I don't know about you, but it has been like a long time since I've had any vacation.
Oh, yeah. How about this? You go first and tell me your story.
Okay, I'm just saying. What? Yeah. I feel like I'm getting a little punchy as I.
Oh yeah, I feel strong, clever, and quick for about 35 seconds at a time, and then like it takes like one thing happening, and I'm like, or not. I don't know. I clearly don't know who I am. And yesterday I had a staff meeting, and I always start with sort of like a little bit of a state of the organization conversation, and was talking to them about sort of our, some developments in our regathering plan as a congregation. And I would just literally, it was pure word salad, Kira. It was like, I was like, and then I was like synergy, the cloud, like just buzzwords, like herd immunity, vaccination, flibberty-derby. And I was like, I stopped and I was like, look, I recognize that I'm not saying anything. Like I realize that this is just a bunch of word salad, and my apologies. So I completely agree with you. I'm punchy as all heck. I've got 1 month till my first vacation in a long time.
Yeah.
I took vacation last summer. I took 3 weeks off last summer, but we used that time to move.
And yeah, that's a little.
So I wasn't working. I mean, like, so I didn't also check emails. I mean, I genuinely was not paying attention to work, but I wasn't rested. People were like, "Are you feeling rested?" I was like, "No, not at all." So I'm hoping this summer there will be some real resting.
Yeah.
Do you have time planned for this summer, correct?
I'm in a couple weeks. I will be taking some time and going to the Smoky Mountains with my lovely husband.
Good person to go with.
Yes, to go to Dollywood and go do some hiking and outdoorsy stuff. So I'm like the person that wants to do the outdoorsy stuff, and he wants to do the amusement park stuff. So like we're gonna
figure out a way to.
Yeah, we're gonna do both. I
feel like in my marriage, like one of us should have married an outdoorsy person, but neither of us did. And so like there's no one to push either of us. So we talk about it like we should like go on a hike. It's never gonna happen. Like it's something we should have considered and we did not. So Gary wants to know where you're staying when you go up to Dollywood and Smoky Mountains.
We're staying in a little cabin in Gatlinburg by like a stream, and it has a hot tub.
Have you been to this one before, or have you?
No, I haven't. Like it's not very far away, but we don't get weekends, like people are always like, oh, take a long weekend. And I'm like, what's that?
Right. I don't understand.
So I haven't been up there in a while. So I'm looking forward to getting back there.
Yeah. I love the idea, by the way, take a long weekend. You're like, okay, no matter how long the weekend is, does it have a Sunday in it?
Yeah.
Then I'm not off.
Right.
Well, we also want to say good morning to Betsy, to Leslie, to Gary, and to Mary, and I'm betting Kathy's here, but she usually doesn't jump on the chat. But that's who we got that we can see so far. So welcome everybody and good morning. As Leslie said, may the force be with you, and also with you, Leslie.
Yeah, May the 4th. It's the like what unofficial
Unofficial Star Wars Day, but I love it. I love that our generation has just embraced this and said this is a thing.
I know.
Other acceptable things would be may the force be with you and with thy spirit.
And with thy
also
spirit.
Acceptable.
Yes.
Prior to 1979. It's a big thing. Are you a Star Wars person? Like, did you grow up like in that, or Karen?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, no, I mean that's the thing, right?
I'm not like, here's my thing about fandoms.
Yes.
I enjoy the thing. Yes. I enjoy Star Wars. I enjoy Harry Potter.
Yes.
I enjoy the things. I think they're fun. I like to read them and watch them and do the things, but I'm not like into them.
Yep. I'm similar. I'm the way I always described it was me and my best friend would always go to the thing opening night.
Mm.
We'd be sure to be there opening night, but we wouldn't be dressed up.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. I loved being around the people who were like all dressed up and crazy about it. Like, I think it's fantastic.
No, I am a big fan of people who like find their thing and are very into it. And
one of my best friends in high school, he painted his Volvo to look like an X-wing fighter.
Wow.
Which Kira is a vehicle of transport in Star Wars. Okay, just checking.
I am married to somebody who is very into this stuff and has been okay, so here's the thing about some fandoms is that they get very judgy if you don't know what the things are.
Yes.
And I will say that I married somebody who is very generous and like wanting to not teach me in like a condescending way, but like
he's not judging you for not knowing.
Right.
And
right.
his enthusiasm's probably contagious.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, so that's an at, and he's like, yeah, good job.
That is literally how I am with my family about baseball. Like, literally, I don't care that people, first of all, I didn't get into baseball until I was an adult. So that whole like growing up with it thing, all of the romance around that, I don't have. And I also like, if you don't learn things when you're a child, they don't sit with you the same way.
Right.
Do you know what I mean by that? Like, it's not a part of your formation. So I wasn't formed as a baseball loving person. So it's all adult coming in as an adult. And so like, I don't ever judge people for not knowing anything about it. So whatever, like someone's like, that's called a hit and run. I'm like, that's a hit and run, or like, like ground into a double play, things like that. We're some friends and they were like, literally someone was like, what's an RBI? And I was like, oh, I know the answer to this one. What if not? Question. The most important thing is it makes me feel like I know something, and that's great.
Yeah.
Right? So I love that. And as Leslie said, it's awesome that he shares with you rather than gatekeeping. That is wonderful and good. I'm on the margins of a lot of nerd things, and always feel like I'm always waiting for them to kick me out. Yeah. Because I love the thing, like, but I'm part, like, literally I got in, I'm one of my friend groups in Facebook is a group called Nerd Heaven. And I don't know thing one about comic books. I've tried, I bought them a couple times. Like I was like, I'm going to get into comic books. That just never happened. And so, but I love all the Marvel movies, but they'll be like, so if you're not a comic book nerd and you don't do like role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and you're not like a computer nerd or a video game nerd, like literally somebody was like, what kind of nerd are you then? And it was like in the nicest way possible. Like they weren't like, tell us or get out. And I was like, well, I'm a movie nerd. You know, like I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I've read the books. The books are great, but I love the movies. Yeah. And like Star Wars, the original Star. So the initial thing, my first movie that I remember seeing is Star Wars. My first movie in the theater that I remember going to in the theater was Return of the Jedi. I was in preschool. I have two older brothers. My parents took us all out of school on opening day, and we went and saw Return of the Jedi.
Wow.
And my first movie memory is literally, I can still remember where I was in the theater seeing Darth Vader's unmasked face at the end of that movie. I remember, seared into my brain, right? So, I mean, that's the thing for me, but there's a bunch of it I don't like. I never read the books. I don't do all like the extra stuff. I don't always know what things are called. Like AT-ATs, for instance. I was like, oh, that's one of those AT-ATs. And someone was like, it's an AT-AT. And I'm like, why? Why can't it be AT-AT? And they're like, it's not. And I was
It's
like,
just not.
but those are the letters. And they're like, it's not called that.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, so what about the ATST? Do you call that an ATST? And they were like, shut up. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry for the thing. So I don't know how to, I'm always on the margin. And then of course, let's be clear about this, friends. We're major church nerds.
Oh yeah. I think that's where, like, I refer to myself as like nerd adjacent, in that I have a lot of friends who are into a thing, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or RPGs or whatever, but like, it's just not my thing. But like in our household, when I set up my creche at the beginning, you know, and Advent, and I've got like the wise men are over on the windowsill, they are usually being chased by an at. Like
right. So you've got the whole thing in, but it's but it's happening. You would classify yourself as a church nerd. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think I would. I think others would classify me that way, and they might be right. I think I tend to classify myself, when I think about it, more as a Bible nerd.
Oh, okay.
Because of my Protestant upbringing.
Yeah.
Which is not to like distance myself or place myself above church nerds. I just like when church nerds, like, okay, so prior to when we started, Kira said something about something called Rogation Days, which is in our prayer book, which is like on our calendar. And I was like, yeah, I'm a priest. I don't know what those are. Like, I know I'm supposed to. Like, I know I'm supposed to know. I think it's about feeling bad, but I'm not 100% sure. It's not about feeling bad?
It's not about feeling bad.
Sounds like it is, like a Rogation Day. So I don't know. Like, there's a lot of church stuff that I'm just not good at being nerdy about. But like, hand me Paul's letter to the Galatians and watch me turn into a total geek-faced nerd. Like, I'll read a commentary. If it's a good one, I'll read a commentary like unquestionably for fun.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I have to stop myself. Like, I'm like, oh, I'll just take this commentary out and read it while I'm sitting outside. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to be working right now. Cause I will look at that stuff and like take notes, and like I get in, or when I'm doing Bible study with my like Bible study class. Oh my gosh. Like I get high off that. I get so excited. Right. Like we talked about last week, who needs drugs when you have Bible study?
Yeah. That was definitely the takeaway from last week's episode.
I think, well, that's what I took away. I think what we took away is that, well, never mind. That's very nuanced, and you should watch our show from last week to find out. Kira, church nerd friend.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about Rogation Days?
What's a Rogation Day?
Rogation Day.
It's in the book. I know it's here. It's in here.
It is in the book. So it's one of these things that we get from the Church of England, and from when the church was more of a center of communal life. And so we have these days in the spring that are prior to the Feast of the Ascension, and they're kind of like gearing up for the Ascension almost. And what they is it's a celebration of nature. Actually, it's a celebration of planting crops, of praying to God for a fruitful harvest at the end of the growing season. And one of the things that is the sort of traditional Rogation Day practice is that the church does what's called beating the bounds. And so, you know, in the English parish system, each parish has a church, and that church is the church for the geographical
area that is a parish,
the geographical area. So the clergy and the people would walk the bounds of the parish, praying, doing a procession, praying for the people that live there, the crops that are grown there, praying for seasonable weather, enough rain, but not too much rain, enough sun, but not too much sun, all those things. So, again, in kind of like a post-industrial society, that's a thing that doesn't really probably resonate with a lot of us.
It resonates almost in a nostalgic way. And then we do this thing of like, well, oh gosh, like in the good old days, but we have no intention of moving towards something like that as a people. Not just you and me, I mean, people in general, like, oh, in the good old days, they could like the boundaries of their community, they could walk and then they could pray for these certain things. And it's like, okay, do you want to do that? And people are like, no.
Right. But I could see how you could actually, like, I'm just thinking about like the neighborhood where my church is. If you did that, I think it could be very powerful. And yeah, maybe we're not talking about crops, but we may be talking about, what is the other industry or what is the other things that happen there. I think in creation care ministries of the church, church ministries that are focused on stemming the tide of climate change or kind of otherwise caring for our planet, the Rogation Days can play a part in that, like really thinking about the gifts of the natural world that God has given us and how that stuff is changing,
Yeah. I mean, is there ever a time more than now when we need to be more in tune with our surroundings, with our earth, with our environment, and how we take care of creation? I mean, it's like we're at a fever pitch.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting idea. So are they right now, or?
I think they're next week. They start like next week.
Okay,
I think it's like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. I'd have to check my.
Okay, so I have another question, and then I want to tap into something Leslie's talking about here. But so we've got Rogation Days. Thank you for explaining those to me.
Yeah.
What's an Ember Day? I know that like when I was up in discernment, I was required to write my bishop a letter on Ember Days to let, at my time, it was a hymn, to let him know what was going on with me. He responded to my first Ember Day letter like very quickly. And I got so excited. So I was like, the next time I wrote with enthusiasm, and he never responded to another one of my Ember Day letters.
Oh my gosh.
And so at one point one time I wrote one and didn't send it. And then like I hadn't written another one. And I ran into like his archdeacon or someone like that who said like, I'll never forget this. And I'm talking way out of school now, but I'll never forget this. He said to me, not my bishop, but like his like assisting chaplain or deacon or something like that. He was like, you owe me an Ember Day letter. And I was, yeah. And I was like, I was like a candidate in the process in seminary. He's like, you owe me an Ember Day letter. And I laughed and went, 2 actually. Oh. He did not laugh at that.
That was funny.
No, he didn't. And, so I'm just irascible enough to be deeply annoyed that it's not even being read by the person that I'm writing it to, and that someone would dare say, you owe me. That language doesn't do well with good old Phil DeVaul, man of the people. I don't do well with that. But I'm also just me enough to be like, and then I wrote another letter and sent both letters to him because I was like, I am not messing this up over a letter.
Right.
Like, I'm not talking back. Had a very similar situation where I was engaged to the person to whom I'm now married. And I remember I was at seminary and I was engaged. We were going to get married between first and second year. And one of my friends, she was like, so what did your bishop say when you, told him you were getting married? Like when you asked him for permission, how'd that go? And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, and I was like, look, I don't know how they do things in Southern Virginia, because that's where she was from. I said, but I'm from the Diocese of Los Angeles. Like, that's not a thing. Like, I'm not going to ask my bishop for permission. So I ended up being on the phone with my canon for transition, deployment, formation. He was a canon for all sorts of things. And I said, you'll never believe what happened. I was like at lunch and somebody was like, they had to ask their bishop for permission. And he was like, oh, have you not done that? And I was like, I'm sorry, what now? Cut to me like the next day writing a letter to the bishop asking like for him to meet my fiance. And like I had to fly from Virginia to Los Angeles for a 30-minute meeting like with my bishop and my fiance so that he could meet her and sign off on it. And again, I'm just me enough that I have all sorts of annoyance and irritation around that and can be grumbly about it. But I'm also the same guy who's like, but I'm getting on the plane and doing the thing. Like, so that's kind of like, but anyways, long story short, there's a thing, friends, called Ember Days. And during those days, people in formation like we were have to write letters to their bishop to be like what I did on my summer vacation, right? Like write to them about what's going on in seminary or in your life. And it's like staying connected or whatever. Okay, so, but Kira, church nerd friend.
What are they? Why do we do them?
I'll tell you what, they're not in the Bible.
They are not in the Bible. So they are, they happen 4 times a year, and it's like 3 days, 4 times a year. and they're actually days set aside for like fasting and prayer. And it's actually, it's so I actually, while you were talking, I had to look up because I was like, I don't know why they're called Ember Days. Like, I know what they are, but I don't know why they're called.
Oh, there's a cat there.
I know. Sorry.
Oh no, don't ever apologize for your cat. I just saw something jumping towards your face from the side off the screen, and I got a little nervous. Sorry, go ahead. So why?
So it's actually a corruption or a contraction of a Latin phrase that just means 4 times, because the Ember Days are celebrated 4 times a year. So it has nothing to do with fire. It has nothing to do with
It's always a bummer when you find out something.
I know, right? I was like,
doesn't have to do with fire.
I figured it would have to do with fire. It doesn't.
Okay.
But there are also days on which we pray, especially for vocations, like
okay,
the priesthood and to, you know, religious orders, to the diaconate, like those kinds of things. It definitely is something that comes out of the Catholic tradition. And they happen, like I said, 4 times a year. The spring, and they're kind of tied to like the changing of the seasons and the liturgical cycles of the church. So do you remember when they happen, Phil?
No.
Okay, one of them happens after the first Sunday of Lent, so they're always like Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday.
Got it.
And then the summer ones happen after Pentecost. The fall ones happen after the Feast of the Holy Cross, and the winter ones happen after the Feast of Saint Lucy on December
Saint Lucy.
3rd. So there's like I'm trying to think of the
one of my best friends was ordained on the Feast of Saint Lucy.
I really there's a little mnemonic to like remember them, and it ends like Goosey and Lucy or something.
Nice. Now Rogation Days come from the Church of England in the Anglican tradition. Are Ember Days further back than that? Are they Latin?
Yeah, Ember Days are further back than that.
Okay, so we'll say Roman descent.
Yeah, again,
perhaps.
Sort of the tying into the liturgical cycles of the church. If you have been listening to me talk for the last, like, however long we've been doing this, 5 months or so, you will, you've probably picked up that, like, the times and seasons of the church are very important to me.
I love that they are, because I'm just not good at that. Like, I know in theory they should be for me. It's an area where I am derelict in my liturgical duties. So
I mean, we all kind of like are part of them just based on, you know, we go to church on Sunday, we see that the vestments are purple or whatever. Right. We hear the readings of the Gospels and there are themes in them. All those kinds of things are part of it. But like when you can sort of drill down infinitely. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, down to like, you know, how you order your day in terms of the daily office. Like if you do morning prayer and noonday prayer and then evening prayer and then compline, like that's like your day has been ordered.
Do you wish you were the kind of person who could do all 4?
I do. I do
too. No, I do too.
There was a time in like high school, maybe high school, college-ish, where I really was attracted to the monastic life.
Yep. I like the monastic life where they all still hang out. I couldn't do like the solitude thing. We're like, no, you've met me.
Yeah.
but like the small communities where they like brew beer or make bread for Jesus, I'm interested. Tell me more. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So Rogation Days have to do with harvest and environment. And prayers for that, and thinking about our local community. There's so much we could do with that.
There really is.
Days, but also Ember Days, like thinking about vocation. Sorry, go back. No, go.
No, I think there's so much in our church calendar and history and theology that's really like untapped in a way that I think you know, people could really, churches, whatever, could really use.
Oh, right. If they took it, if we went for the spirit of it, like, instead, like I'm just sitting here marveling at like what it would look like if we devoted some time to specific time to prayer for the environment each spring and our local community and what that would mean. Like just taking that seriously from term of Rogation Days. I still don't like the term. It just sounds like something bad's about to happen to you, but that's okay. And then Ember Days, like 4 times a year, if we prayed for people in their various vocations. That sounds fantastic. Like I really love the idea of people in general understanding their lives in terms of a vocation, rather than just that being reserved just for people who are in ordained ministry.
Right. And like if there, let's say nearby your church there was a steel mill, like what would it look like to pray for the people who like worked at that steel mill, or to even like go there and ask like what can we pray about for you? I think it's not to say it's an evangelism tool in a way of like we're gonna rope people in, but but I think it could help people. A lot of people, at least Episcopalians, have a lot of trouble like walking up to people and telling them about Jesus.
Right. And with good reason.
Right. Yeah, that has been
who asked you to do that? Who asked you?
Yeah.
And don't say Jesus did, because that is not how. Just stop with that. Jesus wants me to go up to people I don't know and ask them about Jesus. No, he did. No, that's not what he said.
But to say like I'm part of this church that's in this community and we're praying for our community and we want to know like how we can
pray for
you.
I'm trying to think of like the number of people who'd be upset by that would be a very, very minor number. And the number of people who'd be so grateful, whether or not they ever. And see, this is the problem. When we talk about stuff like that, we're like, does that mean they join our church? And it's like, what? No, just pray for people.
And if people aren't interested, they can just say like, no, I'm not really interested, but thanks.
Okay.
And then you're like, cool.
Right. It's been really fascinating because we have been doing church outdoors. And since we don't have any very large outdoor space at our church, all of our property is almost entirely buildings. So we don't have a lot of outdoor space. We've been meeting in a local park. And it's a gorgeous park. People go there from all over Cincinnati just to like go to this park because it's pretty and it's nice. And there's no fee. You just show up and pitch a tent and do your thing. We don't have a tent, but you get my point. The proverbial tent. And people, we've gotten several people that have shown up, and now we have like a couple like families, people who are now like there on Sundays because one Sunday they were in the park and they saw us worship. We did not have signs up. We did not. I mean, we were obviously a church worshiping, like people, and like it was very clear that that's what was happening, and we weren't covert. But we didn't have any signs. We didn't have any like, come join us. Like have you ever considered? We did not do this in terms of trying to be evangelistic. We did this in terms of trying to worship God in a place in a way that we could finally gather in a way that mattered to us and was safe. Which, when you think about it, that really is one of the charisms of the Episcopal Church. Like we want to worship together. That's actually the thing we want. Like it's meaningful to us. We're I mean, a lot of Episcopalians are low key worship nerds.
Yes.
Not necessarily church nerds, not necessarily Bible nerds, but worship nerds. They nerd out on the ways that they get to be together and worship. And so when we do that without worrying about what it looks like, and we're so self-conscious, the Episcopal Church, like we're so deeply self-conscious and worried about what people will think. When we get over that because we want to be together so bad, because that's what the pandemic has done, and we don't worry about what people think, and we just worship. We're not trying to get them there, but we're also not driving them away. We're just worshiping in front of people. People have shown up and want to be a part of it. And the ones who haven't, like, we've had literally zero complaints so far, right? Zero, literally. So we've had no problems. We've had no concerns. At its worst, it's a mild inconvenience if you wanted to walk right where we are. You have to walk around us. But
so
at best,
you had to like get a permit or anything, or
no, because they don't do that. Like there, it's basically like here's the downside is we could show up one Sunday and someone else could already be there. Okay. There's no reserving. And I think what we're going to do as a church is once we've stopped using the park and we're back to indoors fully, I think we're going to like I'm going to ask for an offering, and we're going to do a donation to the park service because they've been instrumental in our being able to be together. But it's just an interesting idea of thinking about evangelism, like what that looks like. There's a priest that we both know in this church named Stephanie Spellers, who talks a lot about evangelism, but really talks about decolonizing evangelism. And she has a new book out, The Church Cracked Open, which is really about decolonized evangelism, what that looks like, acknowledging sort of that for us, the reason that Episcopalians are so nervous about evangelism is because it's frankly a colonizing behavior that is really like, I have something that you don't have, and I am here to make you better. And it's framed that way in people's minds. And frankly, that's just not how most Episcopalians think. Now, most Episcopalians do think they're better than everyone else. That they're not here to change anybody's mind about it. They're here to quietly be better than everybody else.
Right.
Right. But like to take us out of the frame of mind, both of like, I'm here to fix you,
Yeah.
but also for us to repent of our own superiority complex and our own participation in a white supremacist patriarchal view of evangelism.
Right. Well, I mean, the reason we even have a global Anglican communion is because of colonization.
The whole thing. People, isn't it great that there's so many of us all across the world? And it's like, you mean, where are they? Tell us where they are. Well, there are all these places. Interesting. What do they have in common? England just, took over all of them and then implanted its own churches. Oh, that sounds really bad. No, it's okay. Why is it okay? Well, we're not Catholic. Oh, got it. Like that's what we got. Like that's the whole thing. Like it's a tender time, I think, to be in the Anglican tradition.
Yeah.
Because we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, especially like when I have gone to places, particularly like in the Caribbean, that have Anglican churches, and like they're there because of colonization and the slave trade and the use of resources of these island places, and it's just a really it's a fascinating just glimpse into this is and most of those churches are made up of Black people. Yeah. And so when I've gone to worship with them, it's like, here I am, like the white lady from
Hi, I'm Kira. Hi. Yeah.
But even in my church and other Episcopal churches that I've been a part of, there are a lot of immigrants from Caribbean nations who then find the Episcopal Church is obviously the closest thing to maybe what they grew up as. But they grew up in that thing because of like the exploitation of.
It's a very tricky thing because, these churches that you're describing, like they have really beautiful people involved who have found something really meaningful in the church and in Jesus. It's not fake, and it's not fair to suggest that it's not valid for them or real for them. That's absurd. And yet the circumstances that created that opportunity are really something that we have work to repent of. I mean, look, I have a gay dad, right, who like got married and had kids like when he was in the closet. It's not like he wasn't gay and he became gay, which is what when you're learning this stuff, you're like, oh, like when did he become? No, he was gay his whole life. And because of the environment in which he lived, he was like, well, I better try to be straight.
Yeah, that's not really an option. So
right. So I got to figure out how to and in his mind, based on his religious upbringing, it was literally like, maybe if I do the right straight things, God will take this thing away from me. Right. And God didn't, because God wasn't interested in taking this away from him. It was important to God that my dad was the way he was. But if not for that, I wouldn't exist. And I really like existing. It's like one of my favorite things, right? Like being a person is great. So it's a weird dynamic of like the acknowledgement that there's a repentance that needs to occur within the church and within our culture. And also like the problematic circumstances create some pretty beautiful things. That is not saying that it's, it's all about, all that matters is the ends, not the means. Not saying that at all, but just, it's like holding all of that in all of its fullness. So through really brutal and dehumanizing things, our preferred entrance to Christianity, an Anglican tradition, has spread across the world. And there's a lot of really damaging stuff there for us to repent of. And also, and at the exact same time, it has created siblings for us with ties to each other across the world. And both are true. And there's a lot and instead of going, so it's worth it or it's not worth it, instead of trying to skip to the end, it just requires a lot of like processing and a lot of conversation, a lot of humility, a lot of repentance, and a lot of gratitude for the other, but like, anyway, so evangelism, has to change. And I think the Episcopal Church we have to think differently about ourselves. This goes directly into, to me, actually, what Leslie's saying over on the side here about church nerds can be gatekeepers.
Oh, for sure.
And
even back to that kind of fandom conversation, like, how are we when we
you're the right kind of Christian.
Yeah. And is it this kind of like, well, what do you mean you don't know already how to like balance the hymnal and the prayer book and the bulletin? And you're like, and
the worst, and Leslie, like, it's among clergy within clergy. And I'm going to say words and you're like, wait, what are you even saying? But like, oh, that person wears a cassock alb instead of wearing a cassock and an alb. So that church switched from purple to blue for Advent. Purple is the obvious only color for Advent. Can you please stop? Like, can you stop and listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth? Right? Because it's this idea of there's a way to do things, like it's proper. And there is a way to do things at certain places. And also those things change, and different churches have different customs, and different people have different understandings. And so we got, like, it's a behavior of superiority that's not interesting at all to me about nerds. Any kind of nerddom, including Jesus nerddom, Bible nerddom. And I think what I would say, Leslie, when you talk about, she says, I know we're not supposed to be like, oh, we're not like those Christians, but sometimes it's hard. I definitely strive not to be like those nerds who keep people right. Agreed. It is hard not to go there. I think what I try to focus back on is an honest repentance in my own life of when I do those things.
Yeah.
Like, does that make sense? Like, I can be just as snobby as anybody else. And I can sit here and sound like I'm like defending the sort of like authentic way of being a person, but I can just be just as judgy about that, And so the people who are nerdy about those things, I don't know their whole story.
Right. And like, sometimes it's a kind of like, I think what's hard, particularly in the conversations that I'm a part of on social media, is like, sometimes that stuff is like kind of just in-group chatter or like in-group teasing of each other.
Right.
But other people can see it and are listening to it or reading it, and they're like, oh, well, like, here, I didn't go to an Episcopal seminary. I didn't even know what a cassock alb, like, what, I didn't know that was like bad or kind of trashy or whatever, because like, that's the only thing I kind of knew of.
Sure.
Also, vestments are expensive.
Yep.
And so, when we have these conversations, it's one thing to say like, this is my preference, or like, and this is why.
Yeah.
There's another thing to kind of say like, this is gross and trashy, when you're talking about something that is like, I was buying my vestments, out of my own budget as a seminarian and as a young priest, and like, not that I'm still a young priest, but
no, but when you were a baby priest.
When I was a baby priest,
yeah,
I've served at a lot of churches that didn't have large budgets for vestments, and didn't have a rose set that would be used twice a year. Like, there's a lot of some of those conversations are about preference, and some of them are like weirdly like economically.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, if you're not a cathedral church, like, why do you even bother?
Why would you have some of these things? And I agree completely. And I experienced that. I did go to an Episcopal seminary. I went to Virginia Bible College. I went to see this. There you go. There's a church nerd joke, because Virginia Seminary was historically known as a quote unquote low church evangelical seminary. It was the second Episcopal seminary to be founded in the United States after General Theological Seminary, which was created as the General Seminary for Episcopalians in New York. It became known as being quote unquote high church, and in that sort of Oxford movement kind of fashion. And so they immediately or shortly thereafter sprung up this need for a more low church alternative, and that was Virginia. And I went there, and now Virginia is a lot of things, but it's still, that's that reputation, right? So there's a lot of things liturgically I don't know that people that went to General knew, and like, they tried to use incense at Virginia Seminary once. You know what happened, right?
I do.
Chapel burned down.
The
So
chapel burned down.
like just to show you, that was not the way we rolled. Okay. And I'm making light of something, but that's life is that they all know I love them. And I know I was really close to that situation. It was very odd. But anyhow, I remember my senior year and was like, how do I get like an help? Like, how do I get like the things I need?
Right. Like, where is there a store?
And my classmates were like, oh, your family will just buy those for you when you graduate. Because they were all Episcopalians who came from Episcopalian families.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, my brother bought me a watch, which was a lovely watch.
Yeah.
But like
ultimately more useful.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, sure. 100%. But like my family wasn't religious. I would know some of my family's not religious, and the ones who weren't Episcopalian. Some have converted since because, we know I win. But like, it's this idea of like, oh, are you in?
Mm-hmm.
Like the inness of it just should have no place in the work that we're doing, I think.
Yeah.
So like, that's part of the desire even for us to have this show, in my opinion, is just like to dispel and demystify some of that nerdiness, like enjoy it and be who we are, but like hopefully in a way that is inclusive and loving and like inviting and appreciating and curious if possible, and not too snarky if possible.
Right. I mean, we love our spiky high church judgy friends.
Yeah. Some of my best friends are spiky.
Yeah. But I remember so I
always just assumed you were kind of one of them, actually.
I am a little bit one of them.
Yeah.
But you were at VTS with Christine Falstich, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So,
yeah, she's in my class, one of my good friends.
Yeah. So she and I were friends in college. Like, we're part of
That's awesome.
Yeah. We were at Rice together in our campus ministry and kind of were going through the process at around the same time. She was like a year ahead of me and all of that. And I remember going to visit her in Austin, and I was like, I don't know how like clergy stuff works. And at the time,
in Texas is a whole thing.
Yeah. And at the time you could actually go to stores. I believe we went to like a Cokesbury store and get clergy shirts and collars. And like, she showed me like what I needed and like how to put the collar on. And that was just like a really meaningful experience for me. And like, I am always, whenever people like have questions about stuff like that, I'm like, unfortunately, there's not really a place where you can take people anymore because all of those stores have gone out of business.
Stores, right.
Brick and mortar way. But to kind of be like, this is what I do, it takes some learning, it takes some trial and error. But like, yeah, like we didn't come out of the womb like fully formed, knowing, that a tab collar looks worse on us than,
Yeah.
So I do think there is, maybe that process should be a little more formalized. I don't know. I remember another colleague of mine sharing with me a whole document that her bishop had put together of like what his expectations were. And they were very kind of strict and formal, but I was like, but at least they're written down.
I love clarity. Clarity is great. Clarity is really wonderful when it comes to when you are being formed into something. To like not have clarity around what they expect from you, but know that they expect something from you can feel very Kafkaesque.
Yeah.
And I think the discernment process can feel very Kafkaesque.
Yeah. And that's definitely been my experience, even at moving dioceses, even at being kind of in a diocese and being like, okay, well, do clergy wear their collars to clergy gatherings? Or do they not? Am I expected to wear a suit for diocesan convention, or can I just wear kind of like normal work clothes?
And I totally felt that way coming into this diocese. I'd been in the same diocese I was confirmed, formed, ordained, and worked for the first 6 years of ordained ministry in the same diocese. And so I just had, that's what I knew. And through osmosis a lot, and through some people who were intentional, like Christine was with you, but mostly through osmosis. And then I came to a new diocese, Southern Ohio, and I still feel like an interloper.
Yeah.
And I love it, and I'm grateful to be here. But I definitely feel like kind of people like like, well, he doesn't really know what we're about yet. And that's, so it's just something that takes time to work through. So I think that's a big thing for me is like trying to demystify and dispel some of those things. And yeah, Christine is just one of the best. Do you all stay in touch?
We do. I mean, she's now the canon to the ordinary.
She's now the canon to the ordinary in the largest diocese. And when that happened, I was just like, oh, big time. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I was like, dang, girl.
She's a gift, man. She's a gifted person and very faithful. And it also speaks well of her bishop in that diocese, that they are forward thinking and open to, like, she's a relatively young human in terms of priesthood, and clearly talented and clearly can do that job, obviously. But that role is oftentimes given to someone who has been around forever, and it's sort of like a senior, like, end of career position.
Yeah. They also named her canon to the ordinary when she was pregnant.
I know. I mean, there's so many pieces to this that are amazing.
Which, is a big deal even in, like, the secular world of, it's not that easy to change jobs when you are visibly pregnant.
Right. To be like, I'm going to start this work and then go on leave for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It really speaks volumes about her capacity and brilliance, and it speaks volumes about her bishop in terms of what he's willing to do. So I think that's awesome. I want to jump back here to Leslie. Because I think what she's tapping into, we talk about this nerd thing and we talk about exclusivity, and like we like casually tiptoed into put our toe in the water around colonialism and evangelizing. We could talk more about that. I'd like to read this book with you, actually, Kira.
Yeah.
Because I was in a meeting with Stephanie Spellers last week, and she was presenting on her book. And I already have it. I just haven't read it because I have not been able to read much during this pandemic, like right. Emotionally have not had the bandwidth to do it. But I'd really like to read her book, and I'd love to, like, talk it through with somebody. So it might be fun for us to talk about that. But Leslie talks about, like, that exclusivity going further. And obviously, I'm going to read what you said, Leslie. The reason I have to be so careful talking about Jesus is that a lot of my friends have been told in the past they're not allowed to be a part of the church due to their sexual orientation. She says, and I have to tell them we're not those Christians, or it's not possible to not hurt them. And that's something I struggle with a lot. I just want to, I think I totally hear that. I've come at that, and it's been interesting as well. Like, from that standpoint, a new one I've experienced that too. For a new one for me also is like realizing this is the first time in my adult life when I've had really significant, like, friendships with Black people. Mm-hmm. Like, I've known Black people throughout my life and had acquaintances and kind of friendships, but, like, right now in my life here in Cincinnati, I have friends that I care about deeply who care about me, and they're Black and I'm white, and we talk about race and I listen a lot and all of that. And it's the first time in my life when I've really realized that not just that our church is really white, but that it didn't get that way by accident.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that while we might not be the kinds of Christians who discriminate based on gender and sexuality, at least, or at least not actively and not officially presently. Yeah. First of all, we did just a few minutes ago, and we want to be clear about that as a church. That this move towards gender and sexuality equality is a relatively recent move in the long history of our church. So we're not like coming from down from the mountain with some new inherited wisdom. We
fixed it.
Right. So very much want to be clear that, like, we are a church in process and we have much to repent of even now. And while we're repenting of that and trying to figure out how to process that, we're just at the very, very beginning of acknowledging our participation in white supremacy in that work. And I'm not talking about my church, I'm talking about the Episcopal Church. And so there's an ongoing repentance. And I've found, Kira, I used to be like, I wanted all of my Black friends to come to my church. Because why wouldn't I? I love my church. And by the way, unironically, I love my church. Like, it's so awesome. And I realized when some did come, they weren't Did we do a good job? Yes. Were we friendly? Yep. Were we nice to them? Yep. Did they have any desire to be the only Black family in a white church? None. Zero.
Yeah.
And so there's so much work that has to be done. And on our part, not on theirs, by the way, on our part.
Yeah.
So I don't know necessarily so I think when we talk about Jesus and we talk about our church, first of all, we want to recognize when our church is distinct and different from Jesus. And maybe that we talk about that in very nuanced ways. But Jesus, not as the one that we are obviously just like, but Jesus as the one who is in many times speaking prophetically to us even now and drawing us into new places. Like, how can the church follow Jesus so that we can be more like him?
Yeah, I think to that point, one of the learning areas for me lately has been how much of sort of like white culture I just view as like a default, or like, yeah, like, why wouldn't you want to come to my church? It's just a normal church. But
Yeah.
but it's not. Like, it's
Yeah.
still steeped in white culture and white supremacy. And there are kind of unspoken expectations and unspoken, there's an unspoken grounding of culture in not just my parish, but kind of in the Episcopal Church in general, which, like, as we were kind of saying, like, you see it if you go to diocesan convention.
Yep.
And you look around and you're like, oh, everyone is dressed really nicely, like,
Yep.
and I'm not, or everybody looks a certain way and I don't, or everyone talks a certain way. And there's like a very distinct and obvious thing that is happening that, like, you know, for a while it was just like, well, that's just the default. That's just how things are.
Yep.
Because that is the majority, or that's kind of the how the world around me has always worked.
Yeah.
But that's not true for everyone.
No, and it privileges certain people who have the means to do that, who have the, yeah, I mean, like, yes, that's right. So what do you do with it? And how do you respond to what Leslie says here? How do you address the idea that Jesus loves you just as God created you, and other Christians who told you otherwise are wrong? How do you deal with that, Kira?
I mean, I think, you know, my congregation is pretty heavily LGBTQ, and one thing I had never thought about until some of my parishioners told me was that, like, they often feel kind of not marginalized, but as they feel a little bit weird as Christians in the LGBTQ community. And I was like, oh, I'd never really thought about that before.
Right. Why would you be Christian? We know how Christians treat us.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't do a lot of good to be like, well, like you said, like, well, my church is different, or, but I think the most thing that we can do is just kind of live that life, you know,
and for ourselves, and try to create the communities and foster communities that are doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And like,
to be, you know, safe places for people who, I mean, I feel like the LGBTQ people that I know who are very faithful Christians, very dedicated to, you know, prayer and worship and serving in the church, like, they minister to me because, like, why would you want to do this unless you felt that Jesus was important enough to risk being a part of a community that has already hurt you and could hurt you again.
That's right.
Like, and not just like, oh, we disagreed, like,
right.
Validated a central tenet of who you are.
Right. This isn't just a matter of like, oh, we can agree to disagree. Not about my humanity. Right.
Yeah.
And to some degree, Leslie, I actually think, like, I mean, I'm of the opinion that there are times when I'll just say to someone, Jesus loves you just as God created you, and other Christians who told you otherwise are wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I might add to that. By the way, I used to be one of those Christians, and I have some apologizing to do and some amends to make for my part in that. I'm part of a system. You might not have to say that, Leslie, you know, but I believe as someone wearing the collar and as a straight white man wearing a collar, that it's not that I, and to be super clear to skeptics who hear me say this, I don't mean that I have to walk around feeling bad all the time or apologizing for my existence, because that's what people mistake repentance for meaning. And I'm not saying that. But how can I acknowledge, if I'm going to take on this mantle and carry the authority in the church that this represents, then I have to also carry the damage that it's done. Otherwise, I'm just picking and choosing, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
So I think as Christians, we have a responsibility. We follow Jesus. We want to follow Jesus. If we want to make Jesus known in the world, and others who are interested in that, we want to bring them in, like kind of like Christine took you, shopping and be like, look, this is what it looks like. We have the capacity to do that work. But we want to make sure that we're being humble in that work. And I go back to, I want to make sure that we are creating that within our own communities too, that we're helping our churches become more authentic to that reality. Because because there's so much emphasis on individual Christianity, but if our communities are structured in such a way that is being lifted up, then it will affect more people. It will be seen. It will be known, and we can make more progress that way, I think. Bye, Gary. Thanks for being with us today. We're going to sign off in a little bit too here. Right. Yeah. Leslie says, I'm straight passing enough that being in the church community is not an issue for me, but being Christian in the community that has been hurt by the church is hard. Yeah, I completely believe that. Leslie, my dad, up until the day he died, was an out of the closet gay Republican who identified as Christian, and his friends thought he was a crazy person. And they also loved him and respected him and asked his advice on all sorts of things, but they were just like, what?
You're like, how does that make sense?
How do you do the thing that you do? And the thing was, he was like, well, let me explain, right? And he would. And he had, so to me, part of it is being willing to be an outlier. So we're willing, or like some of us, like, we're going to be outliers in every group almost. There's never going to be, I love watching your cat do that thing that a cat does. I don't have a cat. I dreamt last night that I had a cat. And I was like, but I'm allergic. Is this going to be okay? I was like, so far I'm not sneezing. That was in my dream last night. But like, no. My wife says, no, we're never having a cat. She's very allergic. But anyways, like, Kira, I don't know if you feel this way, but like, I feel like I'm always going to be on the margins. Like of whatever, like even as a priest who's at the center of the community, priests are strangely central to a community and also outliers within that community.
Yeah.
Because for however many dozens or hundreds of people there are in our community, there's only one or two of us. And so we have a role that is central to the way that thing functions, but we don't do the same. Our role is different than other people's roles. And that role is to both be deeply in the midst of people's lives and also sort of on the outside of it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's actually like just a thing that we experience. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Do you feel like you're like on the margins of so many things?
Yeah, I feel like this is a very Enneagram 4. Like,
you're not wrong.
Really belong anywhere.
I'm so unique and in my feels right now. 44444.
No, I do think that is, one of the more interesting experiences that I've had is with my husband's friends who never really and I say this with a lot of gratitude, never treated me like a priest.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
They're not religious. They're not really some of them may have had some experiences with religion growing up, but some people do this thing where then when they find out that you're a priest and they're like, oh, I'm going to stop cursing, or I'm going to kind of treat you weird. And I will say my husband's friends, they never treated me like that.
That's the best.
I know.
That's the best.
It really is. They're just oh yeah. And at the time it was oh, that's Michael's girlfriend or whatever. And that was it. We watched TV shows and had dinner, and it wasn't a big thing about how oh, you're, you know,
Yep.
holier than thou or whatever.
My absolute like favorite is generally like old Jewish men, because, which is of course a generalization, but the ones that I've been friends with since becoming a priest, they always insist on calling me father, but they also expect me to act however I want and have no expectations of me. Which is a get, like they're like, I understand that you have this role in the world and that's important. And that's great. Also, it doesn't affect me and I'm just going to treat you like a person. And so there's like this really beautiful mixture of like, I'm going to show respect to the title, but also like, let's not pretend that you're a big deal.
Right.
And like, that's kind of an amazing, like, that's the dream mix.
Yeah.
And you're talking to someone you know you're never going to win over.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Like, it's freeing. Because I'm always low key wondering if I can get someone to come to my church. I'm terrible that way. I'm not going to pretend.
Yeah.
So hanging out with people where you know they're not coming is great.
I do kind of think in my head, I'm like, well, if I'm just cool enough, maybe they'll want to check it out.
What is this place about? Of course you are. That's totally normal. All right. We got to wrap it up. What have you been listening to this week?
Gosh, what have I been listening to? I have been listening to some Casey Musgraves.
Yep. Always a good idea.
Always a good idea. You know, it's been not a big music week for me somehow.
Okay, that's acceptable. It's acceptable.
You know, but did I tell you I'm trying to become a movie person?
Yes, I approve of this.
So I'm, you know.
So what are you watching?
What have we watched? We watched True Grit.
Yes, the most recent one.
Yeah, which like we've seen before, but
it's like a top 10 movie for me.
Very good movie. We watched again, my husband is in this world of kind of animation, character design, all this stuff. And so we watched the Will Smith and Tom Holland movie, Spies in Disguise.
Oh yeah, seen it twice. Adore it. Yep, it's a good movie.
Which was surprisingly charming.
Yes. Yeah, we watched it on Christmas Day when it came out because I take my family to the movies on Christmas, with the exception of last year.
It will definitely make a sermon appearance, I think.
I respect that completely. This is a good decision.
How about you? What have you been listening to?
A lot of Joni Mitchell. I know like one or two of her albums really well, and then the rest I don't know that well. So I just decided I was going to learn, and so I've been learning about Joni Mitchell, and that's been a big thing the last week.
She's just a amazing songwriter.
Favorite Joni Mitchell song, if you had to pick?
I mean, I know you asked this on Facebook, and I saw that you said A Case of You, but that's also my answer.
It's the right answer.
And I will say that when we were wooing, my husband drew an artistic representation of that song. For
that'll get you. That'll get you. I like it. Before we go, Kathy Baggett asked me the question via Messenger: should we all buy and read Stephanie Speller's book so we can talk about it together? Ooh. You know, we could do that. You know, we're coming up just
summer.
Yeah. So we're coming up on some vacation time, and we're gonna have reruns during the summer for a part of the summer. But when we get back from that, maybe we could do something a little bit more like focused. We could do a book study.
And you know, like it would be great if we could get Stephanie on here with us.
I can't make that promise, but I can work on it. Okay. I can work on it. I was low key thinking the same thing.
Okay.
Didn't want to say it out loud, but now that you've said it out loud, let's do it. We watched Notting Hill last night, which I've only seen like one other time, so that was lovely to rewatch. And we're plowing through The Crown right now.
Oh,
we're on second season. We're towards the end of second season. I've never seen any of it before. So
you're not a monarchist yet.
No. Oh no. No. This.
I'm kidding.
No. Yeah.
Here's my. I am a
clairvoyant. Is that a thing?
Here's my own personal acknowledgement, which to me, gossip and following the royals is like it's like highbrow tabloid stuff.
Oh yeah.
For me. Like it's like acceptable tabloid stuff.
That's what it takes. You know what Jim Gaffigan says about that, right?
No.
So Gaffigan does you can look this up. He does a whole bit on McDonald's and how people shame you for eating McDonald's.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I'm done being shamed for eating McDonald's. It's delicious. Of course it's bad for you. I know that. You do a bunch of things that are bad for you. Why would you shame me for this one? And he's like, and then he goes like, he's like, you read Us magazine? That's McDonald's.
Yes.
He's like, that's just McDonald's. And then he goes, and some of you read about the royal family. He goes, that's not even our gossip. That's not even McDonald's. That's Burger King.
Yeah.
And like, that blew my mind. Cause like, that is how I feel. I'm like, it's not even our gossip.
It's not even our gossip.
Like it's, and I have a tremendous, this is a whole other conversation for another time. I can't imagine anyone being interested in it, but except for maybe you and me talking offline, but I have a lot of complex feelings around the monarchy. My overall thing is it's bad, period. But like, does that mean I think everyone who's involved in it is bad? No. Right? Like Queen Elizabeth II, this is a phenomenal human being right there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot wrong with the whole thing. And I'd like to see it completely destroyed personally. But
yeah. So one of my favorite podcasts, You're Wrong About, does a whole deep dive into Princess Diana.
Yeah.
And one of the takeaways for me was the belief that like fame is abuse in some sense. And especially when you don't get to choose it, when you're just born into it. Then it's like particularly damaging. It can be particularly damaging.
And to everyone involved.
Yes.
To you as the one who's been thrust into that space, but to the society that believes that by virtue of someone's birth, they deserve to be in that space. It's a demonic system. That's my thing. It's unhealthy across the board, like in terms of the positions into which it places people. That being said, there's a lot of beauty within that, and what system isn't broken, to be frank. Right. So there's I'm not an all or nothing person where it's just like I have a friend who's like they're all garbage people and they should be hauled off, and I don't believe that. Like I'm not there. But my dad was like big into the monarchy. He thought the constitutional monarchy was a clearly superior system to what we do. And I was just like, you're not winning me over on this one, Pop. Like it's not happening.
Yeah.
So
I will say I think there is a benefit to separating the like functions of state and government.
Sure. There's something powerful about that.
Yeah.
But then choosing that person based on birth is problematic.
That's where it gets a little icky.
And I don't know how else to do it. But I mean, you could just make Claire Foy head of state and then I would listen. Again, I think, True. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know about all the rest, but we could just start there. All right, friends, we're going to wrap it up.
Good to see you. We will see you next week. Have a good.
Yeah, we will. You're here next week, right?
Stay dry. Yes.
Yeah, stay dry. That's true. And we'll talk to you soon.